Welcome back to the Daughters of the Moon podcast. We're grateful that you can join us for another week. And we are really excited. We are welcoming back Maria Deesy. She was previously on with us in episode 63 and 67. So if you didn't have a chance and you love what you hear today, you'll definitely want to go back and check those out. We had a little bit of scheduling things. We've been trying to get this in order for a little bit now, and just with you moving and us holidaying and things like that. It's been a thing, but we made it happen. And, we all believe between the three of us that things align at the right time when they're supposed to come together. So we were talking about that sort of off camera of how it feels like this was really aligned as far as time goes. So
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much for having me back. It's always a pleasure to connect with the both of you and share conversation together. Yeah,
yeah.
and I do feel I agree with you wholeheartedly. I feel it's very aligned at this time, and the energies are different and supporting it. We have this beautiful solar eclipse coming up on the 21st. So, what's better than shutting the old and then stepping into something new? So we could look at it from that perspective here, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, we're glad you're back with us, and we're looking forward to getting into lots of juicy stuff for everybody that's following us. So, what have you been doing since we've last talked with each other?
Well, as we were saying off camera before this, I think the last time we tried to connect with each other, you had scheduled a date. It was last year sometime, and then again this year, but it just wasn't working between us. And last year was very interesting because I think it was my turn not to be able to do it right. So first I couldn't do it last year, and then you had a schedule shift this year. But last year just took me into this whole, like, it was a cyclone of all of these amazing experiences. And the year of 2024, starting with January, I had gotten some pretty intensive work. A couple of people reaching out to me who had loved ones, or they themselves were dealing with, stage 4 cancer. And so I found myself shifting from my ascension work back into my, health and wellness. And of course, that's kind of my forte, having had cancer myself back in 2000, and then the reoccurrence of it in 2004 is what pushed me into the work that I do now. So it was this, my ability to go back into that again and really take everything that I know with regard to, how to navigate the reality that we're creating on a day-to-day basis, how to use the energies, how to work with our body, how to work with our consciousness, and apply it to some, really intensified healing that was needed in these cases. And so my one client, in September, which is when I think we tried to connect, was declared cancer-free and went into metabolic remission after 9 months working together. And as a gift to me, they were in the UK, and as a gift to me, because they were, very uncertain when they got the diagnosis, they flew me to England, all expenses paid. It was like a fairy tale type of thing. And they were the type of client that I would want because, even though there was a lot of fear, there was also the trust and the certainty that I was 1,000% certain I could help them if they were willing to do the things that I was suggesting to them to do. So it was the perfect partnership. And so I
Nice.
had this amazing 3 weeks over there with them as my hosts, and they took me all over. I got to see Glastonbury and Stonehenge, and then they whisked me away to Belgium and two different areas of Germany. I got to visit a castle, and then we ended up in Paris on the way home, and I got to
Nice.
see France. So I mean, it was a trip of a lifetime. And then I I came back to finding myself moving. It was yeah, and it was like that, right? So I left I think it was like the week before or 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, and then I was there through Thanksgiving, and I came back this during the second week of December. So it was a big 3 week window. And there was a shift in the dynamic of my living situation. I was sharing a house with a friend, and that was ending, and it kind of ended abruptly. And I was like, okay, universe, where are we going? And then next thing I knew, I was packing to move, and I didn't know where I was going. I was like, yeah, I'm a good student of the universe. That's all I could say. And I'm very proud of that and the work I've done all these years because I didn't panic. And so I just sat in it, and then I put a couple of feelers out, and I was like, am I staying in New York? Am I staying on Long Island? It didn't feel like it. Didn't feel like I was staying in New York. I had people looking that were in upstate New York looking to see, and then in Pennsylvania, we were throwing out feelers, but like nothing was working. And then a client of mine who's been with me, I don't know, like 10 years, it's more like family now, but I mean, still in the work and does the work, had reached out to me, I don't know, probably, the March of 2024, before any of this happened, and said, hey, I might have a situation where, I'm going to need to be away from my house for 6 to 8 months. If you know anybody that could house it. And then came back to me and said to me, hey, how about you house it? I was like, no.
House it. What the hell is that?
You're in Florida. I'm a northern girl. Like, I don't do Florida. I don't do heat, right? So nothing was working out. The universe had other plans. And, finally in December, I realized the only pathway that is literally covered with roses is the one down to Florida. So I started making plans and rolling that forward. And it just was so easy peasy. And, that was hard at first, but then the more I got into the idea, the more I started to think, well, I know how the reality works. And, I don't have to go down there with the idea that I'm going to encounter hurricanes, or that I'm going to encounter, 120-degree heat, or this excessive humidity where I won't be able to breathe walking out the door. I remember my mother telling those stories when she moved to North Carolina back in the early 90s. And so I moved down here and kind of like, was like, okay, don't need the hurricanes because that's not an experience I need to have. So I do
No, it's
not,
not.
I do not consent. I do not. And then I thought, I'm really not wanting to suffer in the heat. So I do not consent to anything that's excessively crazy. And we've had some hot days where that, it's been a higher humidity, but even the people that live down here have been saying it hasn't been, it hasn't been what it normally is. And
I was waiting for you.
I give myself credit for that, because I'm like, no, I do not consent. We're going to have a nice, easy time of this because I want to enjoy my stay while I'm here, and gain whatever it is I'm supposed to gain. And then the universe can move me again wherever that's meant to be. Right. So, yeah, so that's kind of how I've been playing with this. And, it's amazing what we can do when we shift the mindset. And I know before we started the recording, we were talking about, some of the doom and gloom stuff. But, my thoughts on that has always been that we want to be soul aligned and on the highest path. So if we're looking at the doom and gloom, it's not, and I'm not saying don't look at it. What I'm saying is don't emote it, because it gets stuck in the body through the emotions. That's how we get sick, right?
Yeah.
We keep thinking about something over and over again. We're, intending it, we're fussing about it, we're stressing about it, and then it starts to show up in our reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that I hold that same philosophy on health and wellness in the body, So it starts with us first. We have to pay attention to the thoughts that we're thinking. And most of us don't realize the thoughts we're having because we don't really pay attention to them, but they really tell the story of what's taking place in our life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that because it's funny at work. This girl was away for a couple of days. She was sick and came back. And then yesterday I was like sneezing and coughing, and somebody said, "Oh, you're caught her sickness." And I said, "Oh no, I only have time to be well. So actually, I'm good. Thank you. I have a lot of things on my plate, so I'm good." And I truly believe that, right? And not that I haven't got, I've had high blood pressure for a while now, and not that sometimes it spikes up and then I do that doom and gloom. And then it's like that rabbit hole, like you're saying, you go down and that dis-ease in my body starts happening.
Yeah.
It's like, no, no. And my husband's always good. He grounds me back down. He's like, "You're fine. Just take some deep breaths," right? Like,
Don't
Yeah.
go there.
don't get your mind wrapped
Don't go
into
there.
Yeah.
Good girl. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about blood pressure for a second. Maybe this will help some of the people that struggle with high blood pressure. So for me, blood is about circulation. And that's kind of obvious, right? Because it circulates throughout the body, but it's about our circulation and how we're circulating in life. Okay. So when we think about the blood pressure being high, we could look at that and say that the circulation is excessive, that we have to then go to our mind and see, is there mentalism? Are we internalizing thoughts that are not pertaining to our inner reality? And sometimes if we are looking at the doom and gloom stuff, we're taking on the idea of worrying about it, right? What is going to come from it? What's going to happen? How is this going to affect us all? And so when we are doing that, it's raising the blood pressure because we're over circulating or we're excessively circulating our thoughts into fear. And fear is what raises the blood pressure. So when we bring ourselves back down into a calm state of being, it can help us stabilize the blood pressure. Now, people would say to me, "Well, Maria, when you say don't look, well, we have to know what's going on." And I would say, yes, that's true to a degree, because the outer reality, most of it, 99.9% of it, is actually not happening directly in our reality, right?
Yeah.
So everything that's taking place that I see on the news, which I don't watch the news for years and years, probably
Try not.
10 years or something. I don't even have a TV. But, and when I'm driving in the car, I don't listen to the radio. I'm just really focused in my space of being. And so people would say to me, "Yes, but I have to, like, you watch the TV." And I said, "Well, if it triggers you and it feels too intense for you, don't do that. Allow yourself then to receive the information in a different way." And, all of us could go on social media or, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and see all of this nonsense taking place. And then step two would be to look at something that's happening outside your windows, outside your door, and ask yourself, is this directly in my reality? In other words, my phone is directly in my reality. I could say this affects me in whatever way my phone is going to affect me, right?
Yeah.
But there's a car parked at the neighbor's house across the street, and that car is not on my property. It's not in my house. It's not directly in my reality. So it doesn't affect me. If I start worrying about it, thinking about it, giving it too much of my attention and spiraling down the rabbit hole, then I'm bringing it to me energetically. And unfortunately, when we do that and we pull ourselves to something or pull something to us, what's happening is we're forming an energetic cord to it. And now it's actually feeding off of our energy, right?
Yeah.
So the energy exchange that we're having with it is one of depletion. We're being depleted by it because we're keeping the story or the narrative of it running. So there's nothing coming back to us in that exchange. It's continuous depletion. Excuse me. And when we're in a state of continuous depletion, we get sick and we create illness. Now, what I loved that you said earlier about not taking in the illness of your coworker is perfect, right? Because you canceled that energetic cord. Whereas somebody else might have heard that, rooted into fear, and then suddenly had this intense fear that, oh, geez, now I'm going to get sick.
Right.
And then they're focused on it. The part of the mind we don't interact with directly that operates like bottom of the iceberg under the water, the unconscious, subconscious mind, feeds the conscious mind. And unconsciously, because we don't pay attention to our thoughts, we're feeding to ourselves that there's a possibility we're going to get sick.
Yeah.
Right? So it's the cycle that happens because of an energetic connection that we're forming, and everything is energy.
Mhm.
So, it makes sense. And the way to combat that would be to stop the energetic connection that we're forming to it. But that takes a little bit of work and practice to constantly see where the thoughts are pointing. And then if they're pointing to something that's negative, redirect them.
And you think, because I believe that just about anything can be cured energetically with
Absolutely.
our thoughts, right? Because I think too often, we hear whatever is our prognosis or
Yeah.
whatever. And I think, we latch onto that and, like you kind of said, energetically put those cords on it. And then we kind of go down that rabbit hole. And then it's hard to get back up.
It does. It's a hard
you
climb.
start digging down into it,
Yeah.
right?
So again, diverting back to the high blood pressure story, right? Because it's a knock on the door, right? The high blood pressure happens, you feel it in your body, you take your blood pressure, you realize it's high. And what it is really is a knock at the door, right? That we have to answer. And when we answer it, the answer that we're offering it is, I need to shift something. Something's not aligned, right? So instead of being angry to an illness that we get, or being angry to something like high blood pressure or a little tickle or a cough, thinking that we're making ourselves sick or getting sick, if we look at it and we say, this is really such a gift, because what's happening is it's showing up to tell me I'm not operating in my highest. I'm not on my highest aligned path moving through my life. And something is wanting my attention in some way, shape, or form that I'm now being called to task through this experience, because that's all it is.
Yeah.
Right. And even with cancer, when cancer happens, I look at cancer as a crisis moment. It's a wake-up call. And I'm going to say this because this is just the way it is. Even stage 4 cancer, even a stage 4 cancer, does not mean we're out of time and we're hopeless and we can't heal from it, depending on the circumstances, because sometimes, the soul knows that in order for the human to correct itself, it needs something astronomical, something super significant. If it's a stage 1 cancer, the person might not really give it too much attention, right? I had a client, she's still a client, not that I had, but she's in remission too, from breast cancer that was, lingering for 5 years that she was not able to heal. And she found me through these other people that I was working with cancer, and started working with me. And again, after, 8 or 9 months of us working together, got the report that she was in remission. And, both of these situations involve the lymph nodes. And I don't know if you know anything about the lymph nodes, but that's another circulatory system in the body. And, when cancer takes a hold there, it can be challenging to heal, any kind of lymph cancer. But yet we did it. Why did we do it? Because there was a determination on this person's part that said, I believe that there is a possibility of me healing, and I'm going to hold on to that belief because I am not ready to go yet, right? Now, let me just say that there are some people that will develop cancer because the soul is just tired of the way that the human is living and the way the human is choosing to experience life, because it's not in alignment. The human does not want to come into alignment, is running through the ego, which all mind involvement, right? The ego is mind, it's a mentalism, and not operating from a heart-placed perspective. And in those cases, unfortunately, the soul is creating an exit point. And we all have this, right?
Yeah.
There's at least 3 exit points in our lifetime for us to take, should the soul choose to exit, because it's just nothing is working right. What the soul came here for, planned and prepared for through the experiences that the human was supposed to have, the humans using free will to go in the opposite direction and continue to create chaos. Now, in those circumstances, then, we're going to have a situation where that person's not going to survive the cancer. But again, that population is going to be a lot smaller than those that are getting a wake-up call through cancer. Right?
Yeah, and I think you have to listen to it, right? Because I know with mom, like when we were young, she had Guillain-Barré syndrome and ended up in a wheelchair, and she was like, no, this is not my destiny. Like, I'm gonna walk again. And they were like, no, you're not. And she said, well, I have 2 young children, so yes, I am. And then what are you now, 5 years since from your lung cancer?
7.
7
7
years from lung cancer. And same thing, like she never had to go for chemotherapy or radiation.
I think too is I had the trust when I went to see the specialist and he talked to me about it. I trusted him from the day I went to see him the first time, and he walked me through it so gently, and that helped me too, because I also had moved from the east back out west here around my family here. And I think that too helped, because my soul was saying, you're too far away from those you love. You need to get back into those people that you love the most. And I was in a lot of I was in a lot of stress when I was back east. So that's what my soul was telling me, like you said, is move back, start trusting, doing the things you need to do to get yourself back on course, and it's helped. Yeah, thanks, Kim.
Well, isn't it interesting that you unintentionally, but to get your attention, would create something like Guillain-Barré disease, right? And then the idea of being incapacitated in a wheelchair, something in your reality at that time and your life at that time was pointing you in that direction, where maybe you were in a struggle that felt like you were alone and you had no help and you felt incapacitated in some way, shape, or form, right? And so we created an illness that mimics exactly the emotional body or the state of the emotions and the mind at the time, right? And then you hear that diagnosis and you're like, oh, hell no, because that woke you up, right? But
Yeah.
some people, it won't wake up. And those people who are deeply rooted in victim
Yeah.
consciousness and victimhood mentality are not going to wake up from that and allow themselves to fulfill the idea of the victim, because they don't know how to turn that love inward instead of looking at for it from the outside. And sometimes we do have a lifetime. I mean, I could talk about that. I don't want to, but where we just don't have that support of that love coming back to us from an outside source that
Right.
we maybe desperately want, but the soul is not here for that. The soul is here to find its own path
Yeah.
and to forge a love, a relationship with its human self that surpasses anything anybody from the outside could give us,
Right.
right? So then the next step for you is clearing the grief, because the lungs hold grief, right? It's fear, it's sadness, it's grief. Like, how am I going to do this if I'm alone, or I'm missing this person, or I've lost a loved one, right? I see this all the time with the lung energy, where it's, grief and fear. So we have to look at those elements and say, what do I need to heal here? What thoughts am I having consistently that are not aligned with the soul? And where do I need to shift this, instead of maybe feeling sorry for myself, my circumstances,
Yeah.
my life, whatever it is, right? And then shift that, because one thing that's important for people to understand is when we have an illness like cancer, cancer is a disease of guilt and shame. That's it. Okay. We can throw betrayal in there too. But mostly it's a disease of guilt and shame. So a lot of times I'll see people who, are feeling guilty about something that's happened in their younger years, or in a relationship situation, and they can't move past it. Or somebody, maybe let's say, I had a client very, very long time ago, when I first started the work, and I think it was like somewhere around 2007 or 2008. He had brain cancer, like a glioblastoma on his brain. And when I was doing the work with him, he really believed he was a bad person, and he did pass from it because there was no convincing him. He could not heal from it, because he felt what he did, which was cheat on his wife, was so horrible that he could not be forgiven, and he could not forgive himself. And he felt like God, his higher power, would not forgive him.
Okay.
So he created an opportunity to exit, because he could not see being forgiven for something he thought was so horrific, right? And there was his shame at what had transpired, and the guilt. Okay. And so, I mean, one of the other parts of the whole healing process is I could take, pretty much whatever illness, wherever it is in the body, and we could talk about why it ends up in the body, right? And people that have like diabetes, issues with diabetes, well, that happens to be the pancreas. And if the pancreas is not operating optimally, uh, it's where the sugar processing is done, right? So we could look at that and say it's because there's a lack of sweetness in life. But at the same time, once we start to understand that the only reason that sweetness would leave our lives is because we're perceiving that we're not deserving of it. And those types of thoughts or ideas is what's going to get us to the place of an illness taking hold for the purpose of our own shake up to a wake up,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah. And I love
And
how
I'm
you say that, right? That these things come into our life as, you know, an opportunity to take a
Mhm.
look at our lives and to, determine like what is not right in alignment with my life and my purpose and all these different things, right? What am I not paying attention to? And I think when we can then shift it to that and then say, oh, okay, I
Take back our power.
yeah, and then you can shift your life to
Mhm.
align to creating that wellness in your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. That's such an important part of the healing phase, because once we start to really understand how this all works, we don't have to be sick again. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to have these moments where we're going to feel like a cold or a flu is coming on, and then 24 hours later it's completely gone, right? We're still playing with these energies, these frequencies that are coming. I mean, if you are following anything that's going on in the cosmos, the sun is, we're in solar maximum, right? Where we're being blasted with solar flares. There are coronal holes. I mean, there's one, it's in the shape of a butterfly. Talk about transformational messages, right? That is huge. I mean, you could fit probably 10 Earths in it, right? That's how
Right.
big it is on the sun, Earth facing, so it's facing us. So when we're getting that kind of energy coming from the sun, it's going to affect us and impact us. I'm not talking about those occasional moments where we're going to feel, you know, awful because we're having intensified headache or something like that. You can go on and follow any of the geophysicists out there that are talking about the sun energies and see what's taking place with that. And if you're tracking the solar flares and the geomagnetic storms, you'll see that there is this, correlation to how we're feeling on any given day if we're being really bombarded. So I'm not really talking about that because, again, as we go through our evolution on the planet, something I talked about very heavily in 2017 was the body has to come with us. You know, we can't evolve without the body. Yeah, we can evolve the mind, but we can't stay here if the body is not energetically gonna, conform to the energies that are filling up the Earth's atmosphere. So
Right.
we have to understand that. And we did transition from what I would call spiritual ascension, right, which happened back in 1987 with the harmonic convergence, where like the small collective of gathering, we probably all felt it and knew about it back then, but we were all waiting with bated breath. When is this going to happen? And then finally, it was like 2012, and the Earth was like, yes, we're going to do this, and we're going to start our ascension. We're going to start our spiritual evolution. And it was it's a whole earth, whole global, whole
Yeah.
humanity process.
Yeah.
And
True.
then after a few years, 5 years, 2017, October 2017 happened, and we went into a physical ascension where the body started to feel the impacts
Yeah.
of what was transpiring. So, you know, I think that when we are not feeling good, the first thing we should do is sit down with ourselves and have a talk and be like, okay, so what is not in balance in my life, right? Because the first thing we've been trained to do is run to the doctor,
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, we do.
right?
We
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
And that's disempowering. And I'm not saying, doctors are not good. That's not what I'm saying. They have great purpose. Um, but it's disempowering to our soul self when we're looking for a resolution outside of who we are,
Mm.
right? And we want to stay in that place of empowerment. It's like, with some of the clients that I've worked with who had significant staged cancer, like a stage 4 cancer, and then they would come back to me and say, well, the doctor is suggesting chemotherapy, and I was like, yeah, yeah. And they're like, what do you mean, yeah? And I'd be like, yeah, at this stage of the game, you're at a stage where we're going to use everything. We're going to use every everything out there that we can, and we're gonna bring it into the higher realms with us. In other words, we're gonna change the designation of chemotherapy, right? And we're gonna heal your outdated thinking of what chemotherapy really is and how it can impact the body, because that's just a story. It's a story. So we're going to tell a new story and make up a new story about how the chemotherapy is going to help heal the body. And miraculously, there was this great shifting that was happening, right? But it requires that we trust and believe that we have the power to do that. But, it's sad because for all of our life, I'm 63, all of my life, I can say, we've been told to go to the doctor. I can remember being little and, I had a sniffle and, my mom would run me to the doctor right away, we've been taught that, and we've been taught that everything is bad, and be careful with this and be careful with that, and don't eat this and don't do that, and don't, if you end up with something like cancer, don't take chemo, whatever you do. Well, I've seen people not do the chemo at late stage cancers, and they're not here anymore because they weren't willing to take, and it was not people I worked with. It was people that came to me and said to me, what do you think? Do you think I, should take this, whatever? My family is against it. And I was like, well, I think you should, because I think it will help. And I could work with you and give you another way to look at it that would elevate it into a higher state of consciousness, and the expression of the chemo as it goes through your body is not chemo anymore. We're shifting its intelligence. We're shifting its light coherence. But you have to be somebody that can wrap your head around that and, really understand from that highest perspective that everything in the reality has great potential to be wonderful and healing. Unfortunately, it's our outdated training, outdated mindsets, right, that keep us stuck into only seeing things from one perspective or another. So I always stretch people. If you ask anybody in my membership community, listen, if you want to know something and you ask me, be prepared for the exact and direct answer. It's not going to be glossy. It's not going to be flowery. It's not going to be filled with butterflies. I'm going to tell you because you're coming to me asking me, and my job is to get you there, right? Exactly. At the end of the day. It's like you with what you're doing, right? Providing such great information to those people who want more, who are hungry for more. And those people who are hungry for more are going to be light filled, right? And filled with that divine light that's being offered. But the ones that are not ready for it are going to bypass your offerings and not take it in because they're not ready for it, because the human is in control. The ego is too strong, right? So
that's exactly it. And that was what we wanted to, even right from the beginning. And we've evolved as we've kind of been moving, as a person does. But that's our intention, is just to lead people to paths that align with them, that sit in their soul and say, yeah, that feels really right for me. And by, talking to different people that have different ways of maybe doing the same thing, somebody's like, oh, their energy, that clicks for me. So that was always our intention with doing this. So having said that, where can people find you?
Well, I do have an Instagram page that I, still make posts to, but my posts these days on Instagram is not talking about the energies, and it's not really talking so much about healing. It's showing people where alignment is, like, posting the angelic presence in clouds and how the dragonflies want to interact with me on a day-to-day basis, and all of these amazing creatures that are showing up because in my higher aligned path that I'm walking, everything is talking to us
Yeah.
consistently all the time. You ladies know this, right? Because I know that you know this. And reading your energy fields, it's so obvious that you know this. So I like to play in that way. I post some of my artwork to that. But if somebody is really seriously looking for something different and wants a new experience or a different experience other than they've had with healing, or maybe with elevating their consciousness, then they would go to my website, and that would be mariadeesy.com, and they can go to the book a session page and book a session there. Now, I haven't been on YouTube for a long time because most of what I've shared there is everything that would help in this time now, which is what we talked about earlier with not allowing ourselves to be distracted by the outer reality. So if people are looking for help with that, or perhaps they're feeling wonky from the energies, I have some posts there that might help them. Although I haven't been on the page in a while, I still will make posts and stuff like that. I think that's probably
And then
where.
if they wanted to get into your online community, they can do that through your website as well, correct?
Yeah, it's through my website. It's $33 a month. We are meeting now only because of the fact that school was out, and the parents in my community who do have children were feeling it was a little chaotic to try and be on 3 calls a month. So we moved it to one live call a month, which we just did. And then there's 2 pre-recorded calls that they can come on. And basically what we do in the community is I give, what's happening energetically with um, the consciousness of the planet, with the energies, with what we need to know to be in flow with what's happening now. Like we just came through the first eclipse, and we're going to be going through the second eclipse on the 21st. So I talk about those energies. What do they mean? How can we navigate them? Most of the time I offer journaling points so that if somebody wants to go a little deeper into the work, they can. And then for the live class, I always encourage participation. If anybody has, something that they would like to suss out and potentially resolve, as long as it's not, going to be session like, because then that really requires a session, so we could do deeper one-on-one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a fun community. There's a lot of information to listen to. I mean, the recordings that are in that community go back to when I first started this somewhere in 2020. So there's a lot of stuff out there to listen to. But I look at it now from, the placement of it's a place to land if you're feeling distracted by what's taking place out there and you need direction and you feel uncertainty, so you'd like some guidance as to how to, pull yourself in, reel in from what's taking place and find your footing in your day-to-day experience.
Right. Yeah.
And so, yeah. And that's the stuff, honestly, that's the stuff that prevents us from getting sick, right? Like
Absolutely.
when we're in the day-to-day, like I would tell anybody right now that's watching this, don't turn your TV on, right? Turn the TV off, leave it off. You know what you do? Go back to when this podcast started with Daughters of the Moon and start watching or listening to those. Listen to one every day. And, do yourself a favor and take notes. And you know why you take notes? Because you're listening to hear when you're taking notes and you're writing down things that are, jogging something within you. I find that people that listen and they're not listening to identify something that resonates with them, they're not really listening. They're not paying attention. The ego is still in control of the mind. So the mind is out there somewhere, right? Out there with the whatever they're trying to get away from, and they're not in their presence.
Yeah, I would agree with that because I have often been listening to a podcast or something, and then you like, what? Like you just catch the end, and you're like, what did they say? And then you're like, how long was I kind of zoned out,
I
not
better go
listening?
back.
Rewind. Pay attention now this time. So
yeah, and that we don't even realize that we're doing that because it's so unconscious. And most of us are unconscious because we were never taught what it is to be conscious.
That's exactly right. So if you had a final word to leave with our followers, what would it be?
I would say every day, find a practice for yourself every day that is going to take you away from the day's experiences before you head to bed. Okay. And I give this to all of my clients, all of my students in my community. They all know I'm a big fan of having a journal next to your bed. And I don't care if you draw in it, get some colored pencils or crayons and color something or draw a flower or something. But my suggestion for this is if we write down at night the things that we are grateful for and speak to those things, maybe they haven't even happened yet, right? And I'll use myself as an example for this. Before I moved to Florida, a year before I moved to Florida, I was living in Stony Brook, New York, and I was trying to figure out, right? There's that mind again, the unconsciousness, trying to figure out where I was supposed to move, where I belong, because I knew a move was coming. I could feel it. And I started journaling and I started writing out a gratitude journal. And I was like, thank you so much for this amazing house that I live in, this amazing space. I'm on 5 acres. I'm actually on 5 acres. I have chickens that give me eggs every day. I have chickens. I have chickens, I have quails, and I have 3 naughty peacocks, right? And I'm in a community where my neighbors are not on top of me. I don't even have street lights here, right? Like
Nice.
I'm in the boondocks here.
Yeah.
And so everything I was writing, and then I started writing, well, because all of a sudden I started seeing my kitchen was showing up. And I'm like, I have a center island that's white. And I didn't know what kind of white it was, if it was marble or formica or wood or whatever. But I have a center island that's like a utility cart. It's amazing, right? And it's right in the center. And then I saw terracotta brick flooring, and I have a kitchen here that has terracotta brick floors, and it's the shape of a U. And I had seen it, and I was writing all of this. I was writing this every day for a year. Thank you for this beautiful kitchen, for this amazing space, for this, right? Didn't even know I was coming here. Didn't even know this was my client's house. But I was writing as if it had happened already. And I was writing because it was making me feel really good. And at night, I was going to bed, and in my sleep, I was resolving all conflicts that would stand in my way of actually getting here or being in the placement that I wanted to be in.
Yeah.
So when we go to bed, we take the day that we just had with us. And we don't want to do that because we're not doing any productive work in the higher realms when we go to sleep. That could be a whole nother conversation another time, but we're not doing any productive work in our sleep. So
Right.
if I made one suggestion, listen to a podcast, one of the podcasts that you ladies do, and then write some notes on it, and then do a little journaling on how it makes you feel and what it makes you aware of, and what what it's giving you as a feel good moment, and then go to sleep.
Right.
Wonderful. That was a wonderful message, and I hope people pay attention to that because I'm a big fan of journaling and gratitude journaling. I do both, so I'm a big fan. But you taught me some things just listening to you that I'm like,
Absolutely.
oh, going to incorporate
Oh, thank
into
you.
my journaling. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing space with us. It's always lovely. We'd love to have you back anytime because you got a lot of knowledge to share
You
with
sure do.
Oh, thank
You're
you.
beautiful.
Thank you so
Yes, you
much.
yeah,
do.
us and
Oh,
everyone else. So
as you ladies are, we are so soul sisters connected through the heart here. Yeah.
We are.
yes,
We
we
are.
are. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining us. And everyone else, we will see you on the next
We
one.
will.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.